From White Hat Magazine, I'm Chrisella Herzog, and welcome to Bosses Who Brunch. Here at Bosses Who Brunch, we don't buy into the entrepreneurship myth of overnight success. We cover the challenges, celebrate the successes, and talk about what skills and resources are really needed to start a business. After a short hiatus, Bosses Who Brunch is back. We took a step back for a couple of months to focus on our business. And in an upcoming episode, my co-founder and I will talk more about what we've been working on behind the scenes. So stay tuned. On today's episode, I sat down with Maxine Turner. You might remember our interview with Maxine from a previous episode. Shortly after that interview, Maxine retired from Cuisine Unlimited and handed the company she founded over to her sons. But that doesn't mean Maxine is taking things easy. She now serves as the chair for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Council on Small Business. In this role, she recently testified before Congress about how policies coming out of Washington affect small businesses across the country. We sat down to talk with her about some of these policies and issues, including the elephant in the room, healthcare, and the future of the Affordable Care Act. Bosses Who Brunch is a project by White Hat Magazine and is supported by our readers and listeners. If you would like to support the podcast, sign up to become a member at whitehatmag.com/subscribe. Maxine, welcome back to Bosses Who Brunch. It's great to have you.
I am so thrilled to be with you, Chrisella. Thank you.
So Maxine, you are serving now as the chair of the Small Business Council for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Tell us about the council and what your focus is with that.
You know, I'm really thrilled to be involved with that organization. As a small business owner, having owned Cuisine Unlimited for 37 years, and now that's in the very capable hands of my two sons, this has really given me an opportunity to give back to the small business community. And nothing could be better than to serve on both the U.S. Chamber Board and to head this council.
That's very cool. So as part of this, you recently had the opportunity in March to testify before Congress. Tell me, well, first, what was that like? I mean, gosh, that's a huge honor. And what did you talk to Congress about?
You know, very much like what you see on television, where they're sitting kind of in this amphitheater kind of setting, and then there's a table with all kinds of people who are speaking. That's exactly what it was. Each of the representatives would give a opening speech, and then we had 5 minutes to do a presentation, but they had a written report from each of us that can be as long as anyone would like, that is entered into the congressional record. And from that, they were able to really ask questions. Very important that the group that I was involved with, I representing the U.S. Chamber, there was a women's organization, WIP, Women in Public Policy, and then two other small business owners. So we were all business owners and all serving in various capacities. And we really, what I really saw, Chrisella, coming out of that is that the issues that are affecting small business are very regionalized. So when legislation comes out of Washington that is from coast to coast, it isn't always what it is that we need. And each and every one of us made that point to each of these representatives. For example, there was a man who heads the Floral Association, the National Floral Association, and he spoke about how the import of flowers is crucial to the entire floral industry. So across the board, if there were to be tariffs put on imports, the impact on that industry would be devastating.
Oh, wow.
Now that comes across the board, coast to coast. But there's a company that I spoke about that is a small technology company in New Jersey. And for them, the immigration and the H-1B legislation, which brings in talented people from out of country to fill jobs that Americans can't.
Mm-hmm.
Either they're not qualified for, or as a small business, he kind of gets the last of the graduates. The bigger corporations, tech companies, are taking all of the talent.
Yeah.
And he has no opportunity to then grow his company.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to have that immigration.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes regionalized or specific to an industry.
Mm-hmm.
So legislation across the board can have a positive or a negative impact depending on how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
The overtime rule was one that I spoke about.
Mm-hmm.
That one is very interesting in that it's been thrown back into committee.
Oh,
and
interesting.
So it has not. Texas, actually, their court system stopped it from going into effect last December.
Mm-hmm.
Trump has now sent it back into committee for review.
Mm-hmm.
The overtime rule will never be passed.
Yeah.
But the impact, again, is one that is widespread coast to coast, but very regionalized.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like the minimum wage, if we take $15 per hour for entry-level positions and mandate that into small communities, that means businesses will close their doors because they just simply won't be able to afford it.
Yeah.
For corporations, it's a different story. They will be able to absorb a $15 an hour entry-level position.
Mm-hmm.
But for small business owners, that becomes devastating. So that, again, is where the U.S. Chamber steps in to help small businesses so that we have a voice amongst the Congress itself in making sure that they understand that it has an impact that is very diverse.
Very interesting. It sounds like it was a really interesting conversation there.
It was impactful. I had one representative ask if I could say one issue was the most critical, which one would it be?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, it depends on where you're from.
Yeah.
It depends on your industry.
Mm-hmm.
I said, who are we not going to tell them we're going to help them? Well, he says, I guess what you're saying is we have to do all of this. And I said, yes, we do have our work cut out for us.
Like, that's what you signed up for. Congress isn't simple, but okay. Oh, man. Well, I actually have a copy of your testimony here. And my thing closed. Give me a second.
And Chrisella, you're absolutely correct. I was so honored to be able to testify before Congress. There are few people who have that opportunity, and I was absolutely thrilled to be able to represent our small business community.
That's very cool. Well, I'm so glad you had the opportunity to talk with them. So I have a copy of your testimony here, and you talked about three major themes in your testimony. And the first is access to capital. What's going on with policy and regulations just are small businesses able to access capital? Has that been loosening up any since the recession? Because I know during the recession, it was terrible and nobody could get access to capital.
You're absolutely correct. And I'm here to report that it is getting better.
Yay.
Trump has taken the Dodd-Frank, put it back into committee, and asked for a review. I think the latest word, and that's coming just this last week, is that they now understand the impact. I don't think Dodd-Frank will be repealed in its entirety. But certainly the access to capital for small businesses has been addressed, and the regulation that really prohibited that was the regulation against small banks. That's all being addressed, and we're very hopeful that in the next 60 to 90 days that will be totally cleared up, and you're going to see that the floodgates open where access for capital will be available for all of us.
That's good. Yeah, I know Dodd-Frank did have some needed reforms, especially after the recession and everything, but it did cause some issues, so I'm glad to see it's being reformed that way.
And the one that I really support is the one that is really the regulatory organization
Mm-hmm.
that watches the consumer. It's the consumer protection.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure it needed to have its own department. It seems to me that we could really combine this with the Consumer Protection Agency.
Possibly,
under
yeah.
that umbrella instead of a separate department.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that anytime you can protect the general public, I think we should.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen some of the reforms that's come out of that organization, and one in particular has been, when you have a credit card, they reformed it so that it has to show you like how long it's going to take you to pay this down and how much it's going to cost you if you make the minimum payment. And I'm a huge fan of that one because I've been really trying to pay down debt lately. So
I'm really happy to hear that because there was a report that we received daily reports coming out of Washington, and I was dismayed to really read that the debt level of the American family is higher than pre-recession.
Wow.
And that was shocking to me.
Oh my gosh.
Because I thought that the pain of the recession was enough of a lesson for us to learn not to go into extreme debt.
Yeah.
And it seems that hasn't been the case.
Oh,
we should walk with caution.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's not good news, but we'll see what happens there. So the next thing that you talk about in your testimony is a competitive workforce. So I'm going to ask a couple questions under this. So one of the problems that small businesses, but I think business in general in the U.S. is having trouble with is access to talent. And we don't have people who are coming out of college or coming out of their education system with the skills that they need to get a job. So there are a lot of open jobs, and there's a lot of people who may not have jobs, but there's this skills mismatch. So what is happening there? Is there anything happening there to address that?
Certainly Washington is very aware that we have a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it is that technology is moving faster than we can educate our entry-level positions again.
Mm-hmm.
So it begins first and foremost with education.
Mm-hmm.
I see it happening in our own state of Utah, where we are really addressing this. And I think that you're going to see in the next 5 to 8 years where we're picking up the momentum. But 5 to 8 years is a long time.
That is a long
for
time.
us to be in limbo.
Yeah.
It is a very serious concern.
Mm-hmm.
We're losing too many of our young people, and we need to engage them in the jobs of the future.
Mm-hmm.
And it again goes right back to education and not just throwing money at education, but really having quality programs so that we are educating them for a sound future for them and for our communities.
Yeah. So with some of the education proposals that have come out of this administration, do you see optimism, or are you optimistic about any of those?
I guess it's being cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
I don't think they're throwing enough money at the problem, and it's not always about the money.
Yeah.
It's about the skill set of the trainers. It is the opportunity for young people who do not have the financial support in order to get the education. I think we need to address every single bit of this. But it does take funds to do that. But I want it to be managed well, not just throwing dollars for the sake of that, but really having a strategic plan. The Department of Education, headed by DeVos, is interesting, and I'm really waiting to see if she has the skill set to really bring that department together. I'm concerned. I'm not quite sure we're hitting the mark with that.
Yeah.
But I know that I have engaged in our local community on the educational forefront, and in fact, we have set up a scholarship program for those going into the culinary field.
Oh, how cool.
Through the Roots High School, so that we can really do our part for young people who do not have the financial means and really need that lift, that hand up, not a hand out.
Yeah. That's very cool. And where can people find more information about that scholarship if they're interested?
Absolutely. It's through Salt Lake Community College.
Okay.
And it's being offered to students at Roots High School.
Okay.
The first agricultural high school in Utah.
Very cool. Well, I'm glad to hear that there are at least some good things happening at the local
And
level.
I will tell you, this is just one of what I'm hearing across the board from corporations and individuals in really support of education. We know it's in crisis mode, and we're now addressing it. I'm thrilled to see the advancement at every school district in pay for teachers. That right there is going to make a significant difference.
Yeah, definitely. Because I know that there has been a crisis recently, and we can't retain good teachers because the pay isn't good. So I'm glad to hear that that's being
We're
addressed.
losing them to the private sector, and we're losing the talent in education. And our kids deserve to have those top educators.
Yeah, definitely. So before we started recording, you actually told me an interesting statistic that even in the manufacturing and retail spaces, they're having trouble finding qualified workers. So what do you think needs to happen for those areas? And how can business play a part in helping to train workers to get these skills?
I hate to speak negatively about millennials, but I think first and foremost, it needs to be a population that wants to work. I think it has to begin with that. Otherwise, they're going to jump from job to job and be nothing but a heavy burden for businesses to absorb in training and retraining people on a consistent basis. We need to do a better job with our high school students in preparing them for the workforce. And I think that when we can really give them the skill set and that we convey the responsibility that they have, we have paid for their education all this way. It is time now for them to enter into our communities and do their share. And that means that they have to be responsible in the jobs that they are applying for, and that they have a respect for our free enterprise system. And I think there's a disconnect there that's very concerning. Too many young people will walk off a job. Too many young people will do a no-show the next day. And with that, those are those entry-level kind of positions that really set the tone for their future. We need to nip this in the bud.
Okay, interesting. Well, moving on to the next thing that you talked about with Congress was regulations. And we've talked about this before, like with the overtime the overtime one. So it's interesting to hear that that's being reviewed and probably won't go into effect. What else do you see is happening from Washington with the regulatory environment for small businesses?
That has been the biggest deterrent for the growth of small business, has been the overburdensome regulations that came out of Washington. I absolutely understand and somewhat respect that the previous administration thought they were doing the right thing for the community. There's a very fine line balance between what you do for employees or members of a community and what you do for the business community. And that has to be in harmony. I don't think it has been for a long time. So therefore, regulation really took over to the point where it stopped small business growth.
Wow.
Interesting enough, 60% statistic that just came out of small business owners feel very optimistic.
Okay.
That's a great thing.
Yeah.
On the flip side, they are also holding tight in a wait-and-see pattern as to whether they are going to invest back into their company and when they do that. That tells us that regulation has begun, hence the 60%,
Yeah.
but that we need to make sure, again, that it's being outlined and being implemented in a way that is beneficial, not another handicap. There are several executive orders and regulations that the president has addressed. A lot of executive orders have been repealed. The one that was the job sharing that was really a detriment for those who are a franchise has been totally blocked. That one's out of the
Could
picture.
you talk about what that was? Because I'm not familiar with it.
The franchisees who own multiple locations where they sell a franchise to another owner would turn around and they would own all the employees of every franchise.
Oh, wow.
So that they would have to share in their benefits, into their health programs, into retirements.
Oh, wow.
So the headquartered franchisee would have to then be a part of all of that for all of those franchises that he or she had sold.
Oh, wow.
That totally came to a halt. And in fact, we spoke early last year before the Committee on Small Business, and that was one of the points that we discussed about that. For example, we as a small company go into major corporations and we do their daily food service. That company would own our employees and would jointly with us pay for their health care, their benefits. And the detriment to that is that they would turn around and just pull it in-house, let us go, rather than having a second party that they had to share that with. It was not a great executive order, and we're really glad that one went away.
Yeah, I know that for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially new entrepreneurs, franchises are a big way to break into, starting their own thing because they have the standards and the operating system, and they can just roll out a new company. So for new entrepreneurs, it's a big deal to be able to start a franchise. But to have something like that complicate the issue, that could be a huge problem.
That was a deterrent to even any of these franchises really expanding. So that was a good one that was very early in his administration was repealed.
Interesting. Okay. Well, that's good to hear. So, and then other things, oh my gosh, there's so much coming out of Washington these days.
We're bombarded. And, it's nice to see Congress working hard. Yeah. I have to say that.
Yes. So, we'll touch on a couple of different things. Let's go from least controversial to most controversial. Let's start with infrastructure.
Ooh.
Yes. I mean, none of these are uncontroversial, but
these are big issues.
They're huge issues.
And as I look and travel throughout the United States, I am shocked at the infrastructure. This is the United States, and we should never have airports and bridges and roadways in the condition that they're in.
Yeah. When I was driving here today, I hit a huge pothole on the freeway, and I'm like, why is this on the freeway? That's crazy.
For sure.
Oh my gosh.
The $1 trillion that is proposed for infrastructure is going to have to come from somewhere, because the last thing we should be doing, and I know that no one in Congress has mentioned this, and that is the budget deficit.
Yeah.
We cannot spend beyond our means. I would love, in my wildest dreams, Chrisella, I would love to see a law that says we have to balance the budget every single year. We do it in the state of Utah, and that's why we have a AAA rating. We don't do it in Washington, and that is why we have these issues.
Yeah.
We borrow from our Social Security and think that we can continue to do these. And I know they're big issues. I know it's going to be painful for people to not have some of these benefits that we've had in the past. But infrastructure is one that we really need to address. And I know that there are creative ways that the president wants to do this. One has to do with bringing back some of the overseas money and taxing that at a much lower rate, but having that tax go into the infrastructure. He has also talked about companies that would actually finance some of these in a bond.
Like a public-private partnership?
Exactly.
Okay.
Which would be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to get very creative on how we're going to raise $1 trillion.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of money.
It certainly will help that this is going to mean jobs.
Yeah.
But again, do we have the skill sets needed into these big construction jobs that are going to be needed?
Yeah.
I think that there's so many levels of this that have to be addressed.
And I'm not sure if you can address this, but in the infrastructure discussions, are there any discussions of our electric grid or our cyber infrastructure and protecting and bolstering
those are included in that.
That's good.
They absolutely are.
Because I know that those are growing problems that people don't necessarily think about. They think of roads and bridges when they think of infrastructure, but not cybersecurity and our electricity. So
and that really rolls us right into budget.
Mm-hmm.
And we've certainly now seen the budget come forward. Interesting.
And
I really do hope that both Congress and our senators will hold the line in making sure that we keep within the parameters of a balanced budget. Mm-hmm. But some of the things that are in there, the cuts are very deep.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that the cuts are really to the middle and lower income levels that are devastating. I think this is way too top-heavy with benefits and not equalized. Yeah. I hope that is seen and acted upon.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about that too. I'm also concerned that we're seeing a lot of cuts to research programs, like programs that go to researching medicine and our research universities. And to me, we can't innovate, we can't grow, we can't grow small businesses, we can't invent new things and train students in how to invent new things if we're not funding that research to begin with. Because so many of our very cool innovations have come from government research.
That is absolutely correct. Yeah. I think that is an area that we'll continue to see defunding.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So, conversations on that continue. I guess we'll see what happens. Contact your congressman if you're, if you have strong opinions about it.
You know what, Chrisella, you have hit on something that's wildly important, and I hope that anyone listening to this podcast will take it to heart what you have just said. We need to engage with our senators, our representatives, and we need to have our voices heard.
Yeah.
As a small business owner, I was so interested with just running my company that I paid little attention to what was coming out of Washington.
I think that's very true of a lot of people.
And I cannot stress enough, take the time and keep educated, keep on top of what is coming out of Washington, how it affects you, and voice your voice.
Yeah.
Because it is so widely important. I wish I knew 25 years ago what I know today about the impact on my business coming out of legislation from Washington.
Yeah.
And that goes to say our local communities as well.
Yes.
We need to engage within our own communities, within our nationally, because if we don't, someone else is making those decisions for us, and it may not be in our best interest.
Oh, yeah. I think it's really important, especially for small business owners, to stay on top of this, because larger corporations, they can hire lobbyists that'll go and represent them.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, and so a lot of things that Congress people hear is from these larger corporations. They don't hear from the smaller businesses, and so small business owners really need to make sure our voices are heard.
And that's what pleases me, to represent small business in Washington, because in all honesty, the U.S. Chamber is the lobbyist for small businesses. I was just interviewed by the LA Times. I get these opportunities all the time to speak on behalf of small business. And I think it's important. It's important that everybody needs to engage with this.
Yeah, I agree. So, let's hit on the biggest topic. The biggest one, healthcare. Wow, everything that's going on with healthcare. Oh my goodness. I'm sure you've read or you've been following the news about the American Health Care Act closely, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I take the healthcare one very personally. I have 150 employees. We insure all of them.
Yeah.
And what is coming out of Washington, I'm not sure how this all comes about. I wish they would walk among small business owners, among the communities, and really understand the impact. Where a person who is making $24,000 a year will have a health care bill of more than $10,000. Impossible. Impossible, and not right.
Yeah.
I look at my own personal situation. I have two special needs sisters. One lives in Chicago and he has advanced multiple sclerosis. My sister Kathy just lost the nurse who would come in twice a week to give her a shower and to check her vital signs.
Oh, jeez.
Because of cuts in Medicare.
Yeah. Oh, man.
My sister is totally unable to. She lives in a wheelchair and from chair to bed. She doesn't walk. She doesn't speak.
Oh gosh.
So therefore, she is totally dependent. Her children are now footing the bill of $200 per visit for the nurse to come in and provide this service.
Wow, that is an insane bill.
Isn't that unbelievable?
Oh my gosh.
I also have a special needs sister from a birth defect. She survives on $755 a month.
Wow.
I am actually now her legal guardian. She's had an increase of 50 cents per year for the last 2 years. I'm gravely concerned what the cuts in Medicare will mean for her.
Yeah.
And the stories are unbelievable of families who are dealing with this across the board. We cannot have a health care program that gives so much again to those who are self-sufficient and takes away so much for those who are dependent.
Yeah.
I hope again that our Washington representatives and our senators will look at this very strongly and repeal the health care program before them and go back to the drawing board again.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that what they have planned with the AHCA is, I don't think it's good.
It's not equitable for Americans.
No, not at all.
It's devastating.
Yeah.
So watch carefully what is going to happen with this legislation.
Yeah. I think for small business owners especially, they should be concerned about it because, well, like for me, my co-founder is my husband. And if this bill goes into effect, he cannot leave his job. He cannot come and join the business with me. Like, we have pre-existing conditions. Our healthcare will go through the roof. He would have to stay in his job. And it would just, like, we would never be able to get our company off the ground the way we want to. So.
Look at the impact that this has upon people. And these are the kind of stories. Your story needs to be told over and over again.
I have messaged my Congress people so many times about it, but I don't know if they're listening, so it's unfortunate.
That's a very, very good point.
Yeah.
Do they listen?
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder as well.
Yeah.
I will tell you this, that these are a group of very dedicated people.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think that they do have our best interest at heart. I think that sometimes they are inundated with so much that, I mean, they're not even reading all these bills.
Oh, no.
They have aides who are reading these and conveying information to them.
And this one, the AHCA, went through so quickly. I don't know if anybody had a chance to read it.
It's massive.
Yeah.
It's massive, and this really does need to be dealt with.
Yeah.
I think that and the budget, everything else will fall into line. But those two things are really what will determine our future as a country.
Well, I hope they take their time and think carefully, and I hope anybody who is listening to this will, contact their Congress people.
Speak out. Let your voice be heard.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Thank you, Maxine, for talking today. It's been wonderful
Always
to
a pleasure,
hear about all of
Chrisella.
this
Thank
happening.
you.
And we'll get in touch soon with another update of what's going on in
Terrific.
Washington.
I'm back in Washington in June for more meetings. Marv and I, my husband and I, also sit on the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. This will
Very
be
cool.
our first meeting there. Our huge meetings in Washington will be in September.
Great.
I'd love to give you an update right after that.
Yeah, let's do it. All right.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Thank you, Maxine.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Bosses Who Brunch. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review. Bosses Who Brunch is a production of White Hat Magazine. To keep up on future episodes and meetups, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at White Hat Mag. You can also find more information about White Hat Magazine and Bosses Who Brunch at whitehatmag.com.